Too good. Sam Fricker, good to have you here, mate.
Thanks for having me on.
Mate, it's a pleasure. I find you to be quite an interesting character because I've seen you pop up over the course of probably the last few years on social, and you're doing some amazing things, like obviously an Olympic diver. You've got your business, Sam Straws. You're making crazy amounts of social media content. You seem to be involved in so many things. You strike me as a really driven person. Where does that come from?
I just got this fire in me, always burning, saying you can do more, you can do better. And I've always found by diversifying, I find if I have enough things going on, I just can't lose. Because you've got your fingers in so many pies and your systems are set up right, that I find I always do better when I do more. So I've tried to do that throughout my whole life. Tried to do it with my diving career as well. I think that drive comes from, I think some people are born with a certain drive. I think it can be learned or things can happen in life. But as a kid, I grew up in a family of 4. So it was quite competitive being young, very sporty family. And my dream was just to go to the Olympics. And I was just immensely driven to do that. So I think some people are born with a certain level of drive. Do you think, you're quite driven? Do you think you were born with a drive, or is that something you acquired as you got older?
Mate, it's interesting you say this. I was thinking about it this week. I often say that I'm quite a type A driven person. Like, I don't find it hard to get motivated to do things that maybe other people find challenging. Examples of those things being like exercise, or, today to get in the car, commute to Sydney early to do an interview and to have a chat with you. Like, all that stuff is really easy for me. There's no friction or resistance. It's just I want to do it and I'm driven to do it. But in reflection, when I actually sit and think about it, I find it easy to do the things that I love, that feel very passion-driven or very purpose-oriented. To do things that, for me, I don't necessarily have my heart in, comes with a lot of difficulty and a lot of procrastination.
I couldn't do it. There's things that I love to do, like diving, and there's parts I don't like say cardio or getting up early, or when I splat in the dive, having to get up and do it again. I don't like those parts. But as a general gist, I love diving, so I don't mind doing them. But if it was something I really didn't like, then I probably couldn't put up with any of it because I just didn't want to do it.
Mate, it's interesting because I often contemplate whether that is a positive or a negative, and I think it's a bit of both, right? Like, I look at people who, and I have so much respect for. I've over the course of the last few years worked very different jobs. And I had a job where I was labouring, building wedding marquees for events and for different events, not just weddings. And I worked with this awesome crew of blokes, real knockabout.
Nothing better about a good team, eh?
Mate, just
no matter what you're doing, if you got a good team, it's so fun.
Mate, it made all the difference. It was such an important lesson in how important culture and a group of good people are when you're doing difficult things. And it's certainly by no means the hardest trade. Right, but we'd go out to a farm in Goulburn in the middle of summer because it's event season. It'd be 38, 40 degrees. We're doing an 8-hour day. Times we didn't have any water after. We'd gone through our bottles. They were tough days of work, right? We were just carrying stuff all day.
And the heat kills you.
Mate, I'd
kills
burn
your energy.
4,000 calories at work.
Yeah, I'd believe it.
Big days, right? And just a group of guys who, I was doing that kind of casual part-time. Some of these guys would rock up 5-6 days a week, do that every day, never complain, tough as nails. And I was like, those guys are very driven with something that through our conversations they didn't necessarily want to be doing but knew they had to provide. I was like, I've got so much respect for that. But I think on the other end, when you really need to do something and it's a matter of survival for you, for your family, got a little Mr. Miyagi moment happening here, a little mosquito in the area. It's interesting how people can find that drive during those times.
I think when something needs to be done, especially if I think everyone, it's like people don't change unless they either are inspired or they have to. And most of the time it's because they have to change.
For sure.
I suppose even in my diving, if something doesn't work, you're going to get hurt. So you have to change it. Not because you want to change it, because it's actually easy to keep it the same. But I think most people, when they're given the challenge that they have to face, they'll always get through it because they don't have a choice. I think it becomes difficult when you have a way out.
100%. And that's why I think there's a difference between resilience in the professional world, but when it comes to life critical world, when you see people going through, terrible cancer diagnoses, and
even
they
you're
find a will to
inspiring
survive.
with the health stuff you've gone through. And when you talk about the building, my dad grew up. My dad's a builder, so I grew up on building sites out there where they're laying concrete or pouring concrete, putting in the steelworks. I grew up on building sites, and my dad was a bricklayer and then worked his way through. So that labour's something I thought I would be doing as I got older.
So you talk about that early Olympic dream. Like, how early are we talking?
I think as young as I can remember, like with all my family sitting and watching the TV and watching the Olympics. And when your whole family is watching something, I think subconsciously as a kid it tells you that is success. So I think it probably put a subconscious seed in my mind that if I could achieve something like that, I'd be successful, at least in my own measure.
And was diving something that you actively watched? Because it's certainly not the first sport that comes to mind for me, like as an outsider. Usually for Aussies, you think swimming. You know, I think a lot of people think track because of how much attention track gets.
Yeah.
But diving's quite niche, right?
Yeah, I was doing gymnastics and trampolining at the time, and a fair bit of soccer. I love soccer. Soccer's so fun. If I could have gone to the Olympics for soccer, I probably would have. That is so cool. And you got a team. I miss being part of a team. So having diving as an individual sport can be tough. But there was a girl I liked that was diving, and that's why I started diving. And then the gymnastics and tramp helped. But I remember the pool was cold. It was windy. I honestly did not want to go at all. But she was there, so I would go. And eventually I got a little bit better. I wasn't very talented. I was actually probably one of the worst divers you'd see in the pool. I was really bad.
It's so interesting, mate. Like, you know, you see all those memes on social, men are simple creatures. It's like just
Seriously,
the attraction for
good motivation.
diving.
Good motivation.
It's brilliant. And so how old were you when you started?
Like 12, 13.
Yeah,
Quite young. So I've been doing it for over 10 years.
Is that, like, it's interesting. You say quite young, right? But I guess by the standard of a lot of sports, it's probably old. Like you say soccer.
Yeah.
Most people who go to the Olympics for soccer were probably playing soccer when they were 5 or 6 in the backyard. And
Certainly.
A team.
In fact, when I came into the institute, I was really far behind. Kids had been there for a lot longer than me. My technique was honestly the worst in the institute. Like, it was so bad that I was worried they wouldn't even take me. I was tall. They thought I'd get too tall. I wouldn't be able to do certain dives. So it's not something that I fell into and just kicked into gear and started to succeed at. It's something that I fell into because of a girl and then had to go through a fair bit of adversity and pushbacks to get there. But I had a coach when I was young called Vaninka, and she believed in me and just believed in me enough that I believed in myself that I could make it. Sometimes all it takes is just one person. I had the support of my family as well, but yeah, I came in late, very far behind.
It's interesting you say that. You talk about your coach there, Vanika. That's how I say her name.
Vaninka, yeah.
And
the only person I've ever met with that name, by the way.
Oh, for
a
sure.
Good name.
For sure. It's not hard. It's hard to forget, right?
Yeah, it's good to remember.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that she believed in you. She obviously seen something in you. Has she ever said to you what it was in particular that she found easy to believe in you for?
She's always been supportive throughout my career, even as she moved on from being my coach. But I think she said she's seen a drive in me, just that will to win, like that fire we were talking about. I couldn't pinpoint where it comes from. But every day, I always think, how can I do better? How can I be more effective? And sometimes it's not about just sheer head down, gritting it out. Sometimes it takes stepping back and thinking about it. There's a saying I like, which is first with the head, then with the heart. Hard work alone, I think, won't get you there. You got to think as well. And diving, being such a mental sport, it requires hard work, but then also the ability to step back and analyze and think about how you can do things differently if it's not working.
Mate, it's really interesting. I'm often intrigued by people who are in your position because you go through, much as I did, I loved anything athletic as a kid. Like anything where there was a bit of competition and...
Were you able to do many sports having the
and
lung challenges?
I was so active, and it's probably the thing that saved me.
Really?
Like, it's the reason I'm so healthy now. Gave me such a great foundation of health. Well, mate, my dream growing up, until I was like 9 or 10 because of my liver disease, was to be the next Brad Fittler. Like, that's what I wanted to do in my life. I was a massive rugby league fan, lived and breathed the sports, all I thought about. Like, my mates used to call me footy at school.
You loved it.
Because it's all I cared about. But then with liver disease, I couldn't take large impact to the body because my liver and my spleen are exposed beneath my rib cage, so they're at risk of being ruptured.
Why is that? Is that how are they
essentially
exposed?
They're under so much, they call it like hypertension of the liver, where essentially it's under so much pressure and because of the scar tissue, and some of the blockages in there stop blood from moving through, so it tends to fill up and get a little bit bigger throughout that process. And so I've had an enlarged liver and spleen from the age of 9, so it got to the point where it became more risk than there was reward for me to keep playing a contact sport, which devastated me at the time. But I was blessed that I had other things I was interested in, that I could sort of put my attention to those things.
That's where the diversifying I was talking about just comes into play.
For sure. But here's what I find interesting, right? So when I was that age, you could just pursue anything that you really wanted to without consequence, right? And then you turn 18, or you sort of get into your early adulthood, and there starts to become consequence for the choices you make, because, you know, if you're going to pursue something like diving, you're not going to make millions unless you're the Olympic champion, unless you've got a number of endorsement deals attached to it. So you start to have to think about, okay, what kind of life do I want to lead? And is this something I'm willing to risk it for? Did you have that kind of point in your career in which you were like, this is very real now, and I need to be very dedicated to this because it's going to change the trajectory of my life one way or the other?
It's a good point, because as a kid, there's nearly no consequences. You can go training, you know, you can fit it around your school. It fits into life really well. Whether you win or lose doesn't particularly matter too much. But to me, it did, actually. Like, I was just so driven to do whatever it took to make it in the diving. But there are less consequences when you're young, and as you get older and you start to have more responsibilities, you do think about how that fits into everything else that you do. Diving, I've been able to diversify and find ways to capitalize on the sport that most people haven't been able to do before through social media. So I've been able to really build things outside diving to support it. So it puts me in a position where diving may financially make me nothing at all, but I have other skills that can utilize the diving to make an income and do different things and expand into other areas like podcasting or doing some TV stuff as well.
It's interesting, right? Because it's such a smart business plan. Like, if any business person listened to that, they'd be like, that's a very intelligent way of doing it. And
it wasn't like a master plan though. Like,
that's what I was going to ask. Like, is that conscious, or is that kind of you've fallen into a bit of virality on social? Oh, there's something here. I'm going to pull on that thread.
It came from... So I was a kid, I was diving. That was my goal. I wanted to make the Olympics. That means success for me. I was on full steam ahead. But I'd always made YouTube videos. For 11 years now, I've made YouTube videos. They just did really bad for about 7 of those years.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I can attest to that, man. I'm, similar boat.
So whenever anyone talks about overnight success, I have this graph. I have it out there. I bring it with me everywhere in my work bag just to demonstrate persistence. In my diving, it took me so many years to make the Olympics and start and win a Commonwealth Games medal and to be an Australian champion. And the same thing with socials. Like, it took me 7 years of posting on socials for things to even start to work. But there was never a master plan to sit where I am today. I couldn't have imagined things would even be this good. I couldn't have imagined that diving would have taken me this far. But through being persistent and open to new ideas, it was my sister that got me onto TikTok, and that was my first exposure to short form content. And I got like 500 views on something. Then I got like 100,000 views on this diving video, and I'd never experienced anything like it because I've been posting for 7 years. I thought, I got 100,000 views on this. I got to double down, triple down, quadruple down, start thinking strategically about how I could do better. So the plan started to kick in when I saw better results and then doubling down what worked. But I never would have imagined the way the world shifted and went from every platform implementing this short form content strategy that TikTok had. Because now you've got it on Instagram, X, Facebook, Snapchat, and of course TikTok. And all these platforms now have that short form content. So you can like cross-platform everything.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was talking about this with my last guest this time last week, that Instagram has dramatically changed this year. The whole algorithm and the way that it responds to stuff is so similar to TikTok now.
All socials shift all the time. That's something I've noticed from being in the game. Like, things move. They always move, and you got to move with them. Sometimes something works for a year and then it just stops working. And then you got to relearn, find out what works and stick with the times. I feel like that's one of the challenges of the job. Just being able to be on top of what's happening and being able to move with it. For example, a few months ago, I noticed what was really effective was mic'd up videos. So instead of having a video and doing a voiceover, wearing a microphone, getting someone just to shoot me doing something and using that audio from in real life was super effective. So I just doubled down making videos like that for 6 months or something.
Do you find that you're very driven? Like, I don't know whether this comes from your sport or not, but your sport is quite technical in the way that you have to probably watch back everything that you do to see where those technical errors or faults are or where you got things right. Has that transferred to everything you do online?
I think diving taught me the skills to succeed that I use everywhere else in life.
Can you identify them?
Yeah, even things like, say, persistence. Say I'm learning a dive and it takes me a year to learn. I eventually do it and it's scary for another year. And then after that, it's still inconsistent and you've got to keep working at it just to get that dive to a point where it's consistent in competition so you can do it when you need to. So understanding, all right, I'm doing this thing now, but it's going to take me 3-4 years to perfect. And then you have a time frame when you look at something like socials and something doesn't work for a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, even 6 months, just to have that diligence to be like, even if this sucks for a period of time, eventually I will figure it out.
Yeah.
So persistence is a big one.
It's such a great skill, isn't it? It's such a great skill. And I think that, one of my favourite quotes, Barry Hearn, the boxing promoter, I say boxing promoter, like just great sports promoter in general. He always had this great quote that I wasn't the brightest candle in the room, but I always burnt the longest. And I think that if you look at anybody's success long term, like anyone who's held consistent long term success in their field, the key ingredient that you see in each and every one of those characters is just consistency and persistence.
Couldn't agree more. Like, I was not the best diver ever. There were many divers that were better than me that didn't make the Olympics because they just retired or they quit or they gave up beforehand. Even with social stuff, there's content creators that had better edits, more sophisticated, but you just out persist nearly everything. And I always feel like that prevails. I think if you are persistent and willing to change, like Tony Robbins talks about, people say, oh, I've tried everything and it didn't work. And normally you've tried, or I know from my experience, I've tried 1 or 2 things 4 or 5 times. But I always try to remind myself, had I tried everything, it would work because I would have found what works. I think even just knowing, I've learnt this from my diving, no matter how impossible it looks, if you just keep trying different things, then eventually you'll figure it out, even by complete accident.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we often in life think that we've got more to lose than we do. And I think that there's certainly cases where there is a lot to lose. There's a lot on the table. All your chips are in. And often that relates to financial circumstances when you've got people to support at home. But I often think, like with the podcast for me, if there's something that I want to try that I think could better the platform and the foundation of what I've got and make the conversations more interesting for the guests, for the audience, for myself, what have I got to lose? Like this isn't paying for my living. It's in the very early stages. I've been doing this for 5 years, but it's still in the very early stages. This is an apprenticeship, right? Like you're learning, you're growing. Everything is there to be gained. There's not really anything to be lost. I still work a normal job to pay my bills. So like there is so much advantage in trying things. And I think it's often our own stubbornness that means we don't ever exit the box.
That's why I try to surround myself with people that will challenge me and ask me about different things. One of my videographers and best mates, Ramon, he always pushes back on certain things. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I'm stubborn up front. And then he'll ask me a few times. I'm like, okay, yeah, we should do that. And then he's right. And say, for example, he wanted to film with the GoPro at diving. I'm like, we shoot with the camera and on iPhone and it always works. So like, why would we change it? And the GoPros have sometimes a weird warped lens. I'm like, why would we mess with that? Let's just do it normally. He's like, no, I want to do some GoPro stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, what have we got to lose? And we did it, and that was really effective. And we got some other videos, different styles that we hadn't done before that were then super effective, and that adds into the puzzle that we use today.
For sure.
But I can be stubborn up front. But I think also being stubborn and careful is needed.
Yeah, you're right. It's probably all like, I think in most lives, a good balance of things is really healthy, right? Like in most areas of life, if you can be a little bit stubborn, but also not too rigid that you get in your own way.
Certainly.
Because they all have advantages.
Yeah, because I think also not being stubborn, but being strong on your ideas too is what helps you cut through.
Yeah.
Like you can't be too floaty around with what you want to do, otherwise you won't get anywhere. So sometimes it takes that stubbornness, that forwardness to be able to get where you want to go. And times require that. sometimes you do need to just put your head down and say, okay, I hear you, but I've got to do this anyway. And then other times you've got to step back a little bit and have a look at your options.
Let me ask you about the suit.
Mm.
One thing that I noticed, I was actually very interested. Say you rocked up today, you just come from an appointment.
Yeah.
You changed into the suit. I love the diligence of it because...
I come in trackies because I just got like an injection in my back. Low key, very stressful.
Yeah, and you want to be comfortable when you're going to do that kind of thing. You don't.
Yeah, I thought I can't wear a suit there, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
They're putting you in and out of this. I think it's like an X-ray machine. It spins around. They like move you in and out like 10 times, and they're like moving this needle, and they put it in. They check at the scans, make sure it's around the right spot, because they got to make it go like just behind this nerve and into the disc. It looks so sus when they explain it to me. When they explain it to me, I'm like, I hope they do it right. Yeah.
Because the thing that I'm interested in the suit, right, is so my day job, most people who listen to the show know this is real estate.
Which you tell me your thoughts on.
Yeah, like I love a suit, right? I think the typical gentleman's attire of a nice suit, well fit, it's smart, it looks great, it looks really classy. But there's certain industries and places that I think have robbed the suit from people. And I just mentioned to you before, Guy Ritchie, my favourite film director, has a whole monologue on this where he talks about he believes the suit has been stolen from us because it's been forced upon people to go into the corporate environment. So then people have a kind of remorse for putting on the suit, which means that what used to be the gentleman's attire has now become the prison outfit of many people, right? And so he talks about kind of owning back the suit, which is you putting your personal touch on it, adding the pocket square, choosing the nice tie, getting it fit so that it feels comfortable on your body, because then the suit becomes a choice again. Now, I did a boxing announcing gig, so I'm a ring announcer on Saturday night.
That's a really cool side quest, by the way. I love that.
It's very cool. It's very fun. And bow tie was on, the check suit. I love it. It's great. It feels awesome to put it on. I don't do it for the podcast, though. And I was wondering, like, you've interviewed Peter Dutton, you've interviewed Chris Bowen, like a bunch of very influential people in the Australian landscape. And I wondered whether you'd wear the suit for today. So I'd love to hear your thoughts behind why the suit and this look is important to you.
I like to wear a suit because it shows respect to whoever I'm seeing. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And when I'm in the pool, I wear my Speedos because that's what I have to do to train. If I'm hanging out with my friends, taking it easy on the weekend, I'll wear something cash. If I'm doing anything work-related or anything to do with content or government or podcasting, like, it's to show respect to you, that I respect your time, and it's the way I like to present myself, to be sharp outside the pool. We have this joke that I either wear Speedos or suits.
Mate, I like that. I really like that ethos. I can really get behind anybody who has a kind of their own personal manual for the way that they live their life and show up. And I think that it's probably lost in modern society.
When you're talking about those suits too, like being trapped, I think it's all perspective. Like we see on TikTok, I sometimes see like these rat things, and it shows like a big rat race of people jumping on trains, getting squished and then going to their jobs and being sad and coming home. And that's certainly a thing. Some people don't love their jobs, but I think we live in a great country. We live in Australia where we have choices, and I choose to wear a suit because I love the suit. And when I look at that, I could look at going to work and have that as being something I just have to do to survive. I could look at it as like I'm physically able to go to work and I get to go and do something that I enjoy doing. Like that's a gift. Like how lucky am I to be alive in Australia where I get to go to work?
For sure.
So when I see stuff like that, and that may be some people's realities, and I feel for those people. But I also think, on the other hand, I'm not going to watch that and think that life sucks because I've got to go to work. In fact, I think it's a blessing that I get to go to work.
Mate, for sure. I think it's a great point, and I'm big on shifting perspective as well. And I find it's interesting, right? So in my field, I think because real estate doesn't have the best reputation, and I see myself as quite different to a lot of real estate agents, right? And
I got an apartment recently, and I dealt with so many.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? So when you go, you have and you could probably answer this question. You're a very open-minded person, but still, when you're dealing with a real estate agent, there is kind of a perception that comes with it. Is this person honest? Are they going to be upfront with me? How do I navigate this conversation? There's a certain bit of yourself that you shield when you're having that interaction with an agent.
Put a bit of a guard up.
For sure, right? Now, I think anything that makes the agent look like a real estate agent reinforces that initial belief. I used to suit up. Like, I was always the most well-dressed, impeccably suited man in the first business that I worked in. And
Love
then
that.
I watched the way that, especially being a younger guy, people's perceptions when I was meeting them out in the market was. It's like, I don't like that because their perception of me doesn't match who I know I am as a person and my character. How do I change that? Now I'm quite casual at real estate. Like sometimes I wear a t-shirt, nice pants. I never look like a hobo, right? But I'm just dressed differently, still smart. And I get the comment all the time, oh, it's really different. That's refreshing. Straight away, they've broken down a perception that they once had of what I was there to do. And now they know that I'm there to help them. And so I think it's an interesting reframe, but I'm often like a bit disgruntled at the real estate industry because I think it's taken the polished look away from the people who work in it because it comes with a certain image that those people don't want to be portrayed as. But it's really interesting. I love your thoughts on perspective. And mate, I really appreciate the way that you respect every opportunity that you've been given. And I like the way that you're diligent towards things. I think it says a lot of your character and who you are as a person.
I appreciate that. And even you changing one thing that's in your control that then can have an effect on the people around you. It's like one change of wearing what you want to wear affects the whole persona of how people treat you.
For sure. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about personas because you've had, mate, like you had the Peter Dutton interview, right?
Mm.
And anytime, we're talking politics.
Bit of backlash
before.
since then in the L.
Right, of course there will be because any time that you're talking politics, somebody's going to agree with you and somebody's not, right? And you've got a job as a...
And I've spoken to Chris Bowen and Peter Dutton. I want to talk to Albo. Like,
I've seen you've
I try to
actively
get
pushed for that
too.
too.
Try to get both sides.
And it's interesting because it doesn't always work out that way, right?
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, why haven't you done Albo? As if like I just haven't asked him.
Yeah, or as if you should just text him tonight.
You know what? I didn't think of that.
Mate, I found it interesting, right? Because
I appreciate they think that I could just call up the Prime Minister and say, oh, I think it's time, you know?
Mate, 100%. Well, that's the...
But we are trying.
Yeah, that's the naivety of any kind of public perception, right? We all do it. We all fall into the trap of, we watch media and we think, why didn't they...
That being said, though, and I was on... The ABC spoke to me about this a few days ago and the Sydney Morning Herald have written some articles about it as well. I think they ask about how the audience perceive it, but I get hate on my diving videos. Like, people watch my diving videos and tell me how to dive. People watch my other videos and tell me how to cook. So the fact on my podcast, when I interview a politician and they comment this or that, it's just part of the whole ecosystem of social media.
Were you surprised that the Sydney Morning Herald came after you for that? Like 2 weeks ago, they published an article criticising the...
They wrote another one the other day.
Views. Did they?
Yeah, I got a video of my editors at the moment responding again. I find it all good fun.
Yeah. Well, it kind of helps to not take yourself so seriously that you... Because you know that there's going to be criticism, especially by media. And
that's okay too. Like we live in a free country where
for sure
people should be able to say whatever they want, but expect a response.
So for the people listening who aren't aware of this, Sydney Morning Herald basically come out and critiqued the numbers on the podcast on YouTube and some of the audio platforms, saying that the Peter Dutton reception wasn't great.
Yeah,
but
they
the
called it
numbers
a
on
flop.
social were quite big. Flop's a strong word.
Yeah, I use that in my diving. I thought they joked it for me.
That's
I've
fair,
definitely had many flops in my diving, so I thought...
Nice creative writing there.
Yeah, I honestly... Maybe they did a good job with that title.
Yeah.
Look, well, when I saw the article, I thought, I better go count. So I went through all my social media numbers, and it turns out it'd done over 1.4 million. And 1.2 million of that was public information.
Yeah.
So they could have scrolled back and found the videos. So in my video response, I just showed my side of the story, which is what I think is so valuable about social media. Back in the day, maybe 100 years ago, if mainstream media said something, it just is what it is. But now you can stand up and say, hey, actually, I don't believe that. I think this, and here's my argument.
Well, here's the numbers.
So I appreciate that back and forth. Well, they wrote another article recently.
Well, what did that say? Because I haven't read that.
To be honest, it was a bit nicer, so I appreciate it. They did put a nice photo of me too, so I respect that. But I have another response video with the editors at the moment. I shot it last night. But it's, it's not personal. It's just they're doing their job. But if they're going to bring me into it, I will respond.
Mate, for sure. Well, it's funny. There were probably a couple of paps out this morning trying to catch you in a tracksuit. Before you changed
Before we got in the suit,
yeah.
yeah. I'd put up something like, I was at a medical thing. They can't post that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that Peter Dutton interview, I seen a bunch of it. I didn't see the whole thing from.
Look, he was great to me.
It's interesting, right? Because I had the same. I don't politically lean any way, right?
Neither do I.
Yeah.
Like I've done two, and I'm there to ask questions and be curious and learn. That's the whole idea of my podcast, because I know I can't die forever, so I want to learn from these different people.
Yeah.
And Dutton's always been great to me, and I appreciate that.
Well, I had the same with ScoMo, right? I met ScoMo.
I've had ScoMo on too.
That's right. You did too, didn't you?
And he, again, like, the utmost respect for him.
Mate, he was so lovely to me. And
same here.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Because but so's Chris Bowen and so's Tanya Plebiscite. Like, they've all been really good to me. Do
you think that as a, because we spoke about before, neither of us are very politically interested in every piece of the game. But like, from your perspective, what did you find it valuable to ask the opposition leader and some of these other ministers that you think is maybe not represented in the questioning or the information that we hear as, everyday punters?
And that's what they were saying in the Herald, from my understanding, that they were saying that the politicians will come and talk to us because we won't ask the tough questions. But like, I'm not there to be a political reporter. I'm an individual who has a podcast that makes content on my platforms, and I ask the questions that I'm curious about, and that's it. I'm curious about, like, why haven't we had nuclear power in the country? Why not ask the man himself, How cool is that?
For sure. And mate, I think it's a really good point, because it's often overlooked that you have taken the liberty to start a podcast and set it up. And
same with you, by the way. Good job with this.
Thank you. And if you want to sit down and have a conversation with someone about anything, like, you could have had Peter Dutton on and talked about his favourite movies. It's your podcast. And
we did mention the Minecraft as well.
Really? He's a Minecraft guy, is he?
No.
Okay.
No, but when we were talking about what social media may be banned for under 16s, I asked him if Minecraft was on the hit list, but he said no.
What do you think about that, the social media ban?
I'll tell you what I honestly think. I think it's... When I was young, I had the social medias as well. And there is bullying at school, and that's not good for anyone. And it is really tough out there. The argument about kids being bullied outside school and not being able to skate through social media, I feel for that argument as well. But having grown up with it, I only ever found it, positive as a whole. I can talk to my friends. I can watch videos. Like, I've learned so much from YouTube. YouTube probably shaped who I am as a person, being able to watch so many videos on YouTube and watch tutorials and things like that. And they said the government were going to keep it. I hope they do, because that platform is a learning platform. It's so important. Other ones like TikTok wasn't around when I was young, so I don't know. I know it'd be easy to get stuck in, like a doom scroll, which probably isn't great for kids. But my honest thoughts are, it is tough out there. It is tough. It's tough at school being a kid. It's tough online, and the world's tough. So you've got to learn how to deal with that and get through it. So I also worry about, if you shelter these kids till they're 16 and then you put them into this world, are they going to be thrown the deep end of something they've never learnt how to deal with as well?
Mate, it's a really fair point. And I'm not even sure what side of the fence I sit on here, because I see hours upon hours of mindlessly scrolling as a very dangerous way to spend your time as a young person.
I would
even
agree
as an
with
older
that.
Person. But then I completely agree with you that
like, are you delaying it? Yeah, are you delaying the inevitable of being thrown into a world that you then don't have the skills to deal with? And then there's the argument that, once you're 16, you'll have more skills to deal with it. And I would agree with that. But True. It's a tricky space.
The thing that I wonder how they're going to police it, right, is I remember being a young man.
Kids are smart too. Kids will find their way around it. Like, they banned cool maths games at school and people still manage to play cool maths games.
Mate, I remember Facebook. I think Facebook, the age limit was 16. We're all 12 just putting our date of birth as 1990. You know what I mean?
Some of these systems weren't bulletproof back in the day.
They weren't.
Maybe they've gotten better. I don't know. But if I wanted to play cool maths games at school, even if it was banned, there was still a way to play. So I reckon kids may find a way around it.
They are. Speaking of school, how was school for you? How was the experience of your teenage years? like they're very formative years, right? In fact, I even realised probably more than ever as you become more aware. Now, at 28 for me, heading into get married this year and hoping to have kids in the next couple of years. Thank you. I often look back and think about the things that I didn't realise throughout my teenage years that have really informed who I am now, both positive and negative traits. I wonder for you what that formative experience and years of your life was like.
Yeah, well, school as a kid was really tough because I was dyslexic. It took me a long time to learn to read, and my mum was so helpful. She took me to like 100 different places to learn, and we found this one person. Her name was Judy, and she was a speech pathologist, and she just made me read. Like, I was kind of scared of her, but she would make sure that I did the right thing. For example, if I spelt a word wrong in my answer and that word was written in the question, she'd go off because she thought I was just pure lazy. So I think being driven by fear has been quite successful for me over my years. Like that, what taught me to read, having someone that was just like, no, you're going to do it no matter what. So that was tough as a kid.
Approach.
That was tough because in class, I couldn't really concentrate. I was so all over the shop and I was really bad at it. So you put me in a place where I can't really concentrate. I'm really bad at it. I got in a lot of trouble. I was in trouble all the time. They wouldn't even let me go home until my mum had come and spoken to the teachers. Every day they'd like drag me out, hold me there until my mum would come and talk to them. But like, I never really saw myself as, you know, poor me. I was more just like, I want to do this. I'm going to go do that. Oh, they're angry at me. Oh well. I remember they come up with this system. They called it traffic light system to explain how naughty I'd been in class. And I remember they'd be like, today you're on red. And I was like, I know I'm being naughty, but I just don't care. I'm just like, I couldn't concentrate.
Were you being naughty as a means to just...
I was just bored.
It was almost just, hey, look, I can't read what's going on here. I can't keep up.
I was just bored. And I didn't want to sit down and like colour in letters. I was really bad at it. And I just didn't have the patience or the concentration for it.
At what age was this?
That was like my whole primary school. Got in a lot of trouble. And then I then I got into the institute. And because I had always been pretty bad at everything my whole life, I was really good with like building. Like my dad was a builder. I grew up on building sites. I thought I'd become a tradie and be a builder. And I really enjoyed that, being outside, putting things together. Like I'd build tree houses outside. I remember I used to build these flying foxes. I'd have my toolbox with all my stuff and I used to break things. My dad would like come home and give me like an old TV that I could pull apart so I could learn about it and things like that. Like I was really hands-on and outdoorsy. But then I got into the Institute for Diving. And it was just like my whole family kind of moved to Sydney. And I got into the Institute for Diving and I got put into Trinity Grammar, which is a private school. And I'd never been exposed to something like that. And my life went from like real scat, no pressure, but also not doing very well, to extremely strict diving and school, a very rigid life. But I just also had this immense sense of responsibility that I've been given this opportunity and that I must make it work. So I think that was a turning point in my whole life because I'd struggled at nearly everything, but I also had this sense of responsibility that now's my chance to make things work for me.
What did you think of the private school system? Because I went to a private school, but down where I'm from, it was a very small... The reason I went to the school I went to was, you know, taking 30 to 50 tablets a day as a kid. Not every school was okay with. In fact, a lot of the public schools weren't okay with me doing that in the playground. And so my parents made a conscious decision. Man. See, for me, it was fine because it was my normal environment, right?
Yeah, I get you. Similar to me with my reading.
Right, exactly. Like it's your normal. Yeah. So, you know, from the outside looking in, it's different. But for you, it's your everyday. So my parents chose the school that I went to from preschool. We called it prep. Because they were happy for me to take my tablets. They couldn't harm anyone else. They were just a natural digestive enzyme that your body already produces. I just didn't produce them. So my parents picked a school that was pretty local to us. It was a private Christian school, very small school. Like when I started, maybe 20 kids a year. By the time I finished school, year 10, there was up to 40 kids a year, but pretty niche school, right? And it was a private education, but not like you'd see in one of these kind of upper class, sort of higher class social settings of Sydney where it's, you know, gigantic, magnificent Hogwarts style buildings and very strict uniform policy.
I got a scholarship there for my diving, which was great. So I was there for a diving scholarship and they had a pool. And the reason I went to Trinity was because one of the diving coaches who I was training with at the time, her husband, a guy named Marty Lang, he worked at Trinity, and he said that if you move to Sydney for diving, we'll look after you and take you in and put you through schooling, and he'll be there to kind of look out for me at school, which was really helpful. So that's why I chose Trinity, and they gave me a scholarship to support me. But it was strict. It was really strict. But I think I appreciated that. I think I needed that. Being a kid who is probably only going to get better by fear in terms of someone telling me, like, I work best even at training where they're like, all right, you're doing this. I'm like, oh, what about this? You're doing that. Okay. You know, especially when it comes to tough things.
A bit of structure.
Yeah, structure helps. And I've had to build structure in my own life now that I have my own company and I run my own businesses and I've got my diving and I have that responsibility on my own and I'm able to build my own structure. But as a kid, I didn't have those skills. So I needed someone to give me that structure, to give me a blueprint of even how to work hard. And I think my diving coaches did that too. Like, I didn't know how to work hard, but they gave me this blueprint of like, if you want to succeed, this is how you do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can do that. I can do that.
Talk to me about, so was it an all boys or co-ed?
It was an all boys school, but there was always girls at training. So I wasn't like just stuck in this all boys environment for my whole schooling career. I would have rather gone to a co-ed school just because I like being around girls.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's why I started diving.
As a young man, that's usually the pick of any guy at an all boys private school is.
But you know what, I was surprised. I thought going to an all boys school, you'd have less boys trying to show off in front of girls. I was wrong. You just have the boys trying to show off in front of the other boys. That surprised me. But other than that, the school was good. Like, they helped me build into the person I am by having strict regiments.
So it's interesting. You obviously had a positive experience, right? Now, there's been a lot of criticism lately. I don't know if you've seen some of the movement online saying that they don't think all boys private schools should exist. I can't remember the exact media figure, but they believe it's a bad environment that encourages, you know, I don't believe that toxic masculinity is a thing. I think that traditional, true traits of masculinity, like true traits, are a service to all of humanity, and anything that represents damaging traits of personality or attributes towards women and other people isn't a true sign of masculinity, right? It's just a problem. It's not toxic masculinity. It's actually undeveloped masculinity. But there is a lot of criticism at the moment that some of these private school all boys environments breed bad habits in men that make them not functioning members of society. I don't believe that is the case. I think
that wasn't my experience at the school, and a lot of my friends from there have gone out to do extremely well and are very respectful towards women. And most men are, but there is a big problem with that. And I think it needs to be called out when we see it as a man. If you see someone who's disrespectful, you need to call it out. I've seen it in diving and I've had to call it out, and you do that. And you'll find most of your guy friends will actually get behind you and support you calling that out as not being okay. But those things do happen. There are bad apples, and then we need to, pull together and acknowledge that, point that out, and give support to the people that need. Like when I've seen that happen at the pool.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that any environment you exist in is going to have those bad apples, as you said. I went to a very small private school. There were people that had terrible morals, but there was plenty of people who had good ones. Right? It's just like that's society. And like, it all
depends on who you hang around as well. Like a lot of my friends are really, really good people I'm proud to have around me that I could trust to always do the right thing.
For sure.
So I also think who you surround yourself with affects the whole way you see the world. But I want to acknowledge that is an issue, and I think it's good for men to call it out when they see it.
Mate, 100%. I think it's actually a sign of well-developed character.
Especially having sisters. Like, I always think about how I would feel if someone did or said something like that to my sister.
For sure.
I got two of them.
Well, mate, I think that any school is... We live in a world of imperfect human beings, right? Like, there is imperfect natures. There are people who come from different environments to... you've spoken about your very loving family, and I come from a very loving family where those...
There was challenges still growing up. Like, I didn't have, the perfect childhood by any means.
Talk to me about that then. Like, what does that mean?
I just had a lot of siblings, very competitive. I get along with them all better as I've grown up, actually. A lot of arguments as a kid.
You said family of 4. Is that 4 kids?
Yeah, 5. I'm one of 5.
Oh, wow.
Two older, 2 younger.
Okay, there you go. So you're the middle kid.
Yeah, right in the middle.
The middle kid syndrome, hey?
Right in the middle. I still think the youngest has it easiest.
Yeah, the youngest is always the baby. The
My
parents
younger
learn all
brother.
of it.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because my sister would disagree with that. My sister would say I'm the golden child. It's just
Really?
the two of us.
Oh,
I'm
okay. You're the youngest?
I'm the oldest.
You're the eldest. Okay. I feel like
Yeah.
my eldest sister, mum was the most strict on her. I remember she had a boyfriend and mum would even let her boyfriend sleep in the same room as her until they were like a fair bit older.
Yeah.
But then as I think she has more kids, like the standards just go down. Like they're so more relaxed with that stuff, which I think's good. I think mum's always been really good with me on giving me like a lot of rope to go out and do what I want while making sure that I'm okay.
100%. Well, and just to go back to what we're talking about, I think those standards, you're right. When you got sisters, I got a younger sister. When you got women in your life that you love. But I just think when you're a good person, like I think it's common sense that if you've seen someone disrespecting a woman, you say something about it. You don't allow that to happen around you. But I hate that we've thrown a blanket over society in different areas and we've gone, all boys school can't be good. It's not the case. If the people and the characters who are vocal within that environment stand for good things, then majority of people who come from that environment will go out into the world and stand for good things. It is, you become a product of your environment, but you can also make your environment a product of you. And I think that when you've got people with good morals, it's very individual and then it can grow out. They say one rotten apple can cause a tree to go rotten, but also like one bright, shining, morally intact human being can have a really big effect on the people around them. And so I love how you've been able to speak positively about your experience there and the way that you've decided individually to stand for the right things. Because I think it's a great lesson for anybody, is that you really can do that wherever you exist.
Certainly. And I think you need to. Like, you got to stand up for what you believe in and what is right.
Talk about, grew up in Newcastle, which is very similar to where I'm from. Working class town.
It sounds like we're similar in opposite ways. You know, you're down in Wollongong, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm just probably the same distance, a bit further up the coast.
Well, I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of people compare Newcastle and Wollongong as very similar because they're both steel working towns.
Yeah, a lot of exports. I know Newey's one of the biggest coal exports in the country, or it used to be. So you got those ships off the coast all the time.
For sure.
It was a nice place to grow up. It was safe. It was like a pretty hard working place.
Yep. Pretty middle class upbringing.
Yeah, I just went to like the local public school and then I went to a selective school for performing arts. It's called Hunter School of Performing Arts. I went there for drama. Drama kid. Yeah, I got in for drama and then I moved to Trinity. But
do you ever think about that now? Like you've got a bit of a personality online. You know, obviously, like you said, you can't dive forever, right?
Yeah.
You maybe got a few more years left in you diving.
Hopefully, we'll see if this back prevails. I got this injection today. They said that it should help. But even with the back issues, because it's quite a severe thing, it's my spine. And they were doing a spinal injection this morning. And I said to the radiologist, like, do you think if I keep diving, I'm going to destroy my back forever? Because if you say yes, I'll stop. And they say they're not sure, but to get the injection, see how it goes. But you do get to a point where you're like, I've achieved nearly everything I want in diving. I want to keep diving. But at this point in my life, if that cost is destroying my back, it's not worth it.
Can I ask you, feeling that kind of uncertainty about your future, does it affect your ability to perform?
What it does is it adds a layer of complexity, but it doesn't, because you just stick to your job. My job's to show up, my job's to train, and I do that. Yeah. And I just do that. And it's been so tough training injured because what it is, it's like a sharp pain that shoots down your leg. And it's not like a hard pain of, like I've broken bones and it's like a harder pain, but it's like, because it hits your nerve, it's sharp. So it's not something you can push through, but I've been able to stay fit, stay in shape. And for example, just doing bench press, like it hurts just to lay down. Once I get in that position, it's okay and I can do the exercise. And you train like that, or you try to do what you can for months, and all in the back of your head, you're like, should I really be doing this? Should I be stopping? But then on the other side, I'm thinking, if I just leave it, could it get worse because I'm not doing my proper recovery? So it puts you in a tricky spot, and then you've just got to try and narrow it down to, okay, right now, I got to do my rehab, and that's what I got to do to get me through today, and just kind of break it down that way.
Talk me through the structure of your day, because you kind of gave me a little bit of insight yesterday on the phone, but what does a day in your life, Monday to Friday, look like?
So I wake up Monday morning. I get up at around 5 a.m. I got training at 6 a.m. at Olympic Park. I train from 6 to 8. I then typically go home and work from home, whether that's editing, planning content, filming, talking to my team, organising different stuff, or we might be out doing a podcast, filming, different things like that. Then I train the afternoon, every afternoon, from about 1:30 to 4:30. Then I go home and I typically work until I go to sleep, whether that's, again, editing, planning, filming, doing all those kinds of things.
How do those sessions break down? Is like morning technical or afternoon technical? Like, how does that look?
Morning's always in the gym. Afternoon's always in the pool. And I find this is why I want to keep diving, because it perfectly structures my life to keep me so effective. Because I wake up, I train, I'm feeling good, I go to work. I then go back to training. It's like a reset. And then I get to focus on that. And I feel fresh when I come back to work again. And I sleep really well. I try to eat as best as possible. And I still fit in things I want to do. But that would be a standard day of my life. But I love it.
When you say you still fit things in, like, I can imagine that comes with some difficulty though, right?
Yeah. Like, for example, if I want to go see a friend, if I want to go get dinner or something, I can go do that. But like, I can't be out super late because I got to make sure I get enough sleep for the next day. You do get like sleep anxiety because you're so busy. Like, because I'm so busy, if I don't get enough sleep, it affects my performance throughout the whole day. And with diving, when I'm doing my hardest dives, when I'm not at peak condition, those dives are really difficult. So my whole life, I've like got to get enough rest so I can perform my jobs during the day.
When you're thinking about what it takes to be a good diver physically, how much of a component is strength and power?
Strength and power is crucial, but all divers, most of them train hard, and training hard is needed. And you've got to have that fast muscle to jump, tight abs to hold in position, but it's the mental side. Diving is really mental because when you're in the air, it goes so fast. What it is mental patterns of how you do that dive and what you're used to. So if you can get stronger, you can make the dive easier. You got more time to make a decision and things like that. But at the top level, most of it comes down to your mental training.
It's interesting, right? So in saying that, do you see like cognitive patterns that exist in most successful divers where they're able to move through patterns? Like, is there, I guess what I'm trying to ask, are there other things that divers are typically good at that make them critically and technique driven in the pool?
Everyone's different. It's also more mental for some than others. Like, some divers I look at and I think they just get up there, don't think and just do, and that works for them. And maybe they are thinking a lot, but I actually don't know that. A lot of the time too, when you're the world champs, everyone's trying to play it pretty cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you could be, and this is something I've learned through diving. I could be terrified, 10 out of 10 concerned about a dive, and you probably wouldn't even know it if you're staying next to me for 2 hours. You just wouldn't know it because I'm just good at pretending I don't care about that. Yeah. And you need to. So I think that's been a really useful skill for life, being thrown in any situation and being able to control how you're feeling, at least on the outside. Because you need it when you perform. You don't want to show weakness. And there is a time to be vulnerable and things like that. No time when you're competing.
Yeah, you've got to be in that mindset, right? It's interesting. One thing that I know you've spoken about before is, and a big part of your content early days was your Olympic experience.
I love that.
It was a very different experience for you than it has been for a lot of others, though, because it was a quarantine Olympics.
Although I had nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, correct. Like, it's a first. One of the things that I was interested, like, existing in the Tokyo Olympic Games and the quarantines that took place and the isolation, did you get an opportunity to connect with athletes from different countries, or were you very much just within the Australian camp?
It's an amazing place, the Olympic Village. You walk around and you look at it and you think, why can't the world just be this united? Because everyone just gets along. So it's quite a heartwarming thing to walk down the street and see every flag in the world lined up and everyone happily getting along. Like, that warms my heart. That's nice. Cool. You have the Australia building, which makes you feel like home. The ASC have extremely good staff that just make you feel super comfortable. Because it was a COVID games, not a lot of people were talking. Like, even in the food court, they had these cross-section plastic sheets or walls, so no one, like, if I was sitting at the food, if I was in the food hall with one of my best mates, I had to like sit back so I could talk to them because there was a wall of plastic in between. So because everyone was so segregated, from wearing masks to food courts, and no one wanted to get sick, because if you've made the Olympics but you don't compete, I don't think you're an Olympian. So say you've made the Olympics and you get sick and you get kicked off the team because you had COVID and you didn't compete. You've then nearly done all that work and technically you're not an Olympian. So I think everyone was trying to mingle after comp. Before comp, I think people were careful.
Did you get any opportunities to mingle post-competition where you were able to meet people from different countries, hear their experience? Like, for me, things that stand out, like Ukrainian, Russian, these kind of countries that are divided.
Yeah. And I've competed against the Ukrainians and the Russians for years, like over half a decade. I've been competing against both of them. I've been to Ukraine and competed at Junior Worlds there. I've competed against Russians, and what makes me sad is when I see Russians and I compete with them, they're my friends. They're nice. And same with Ukraine. The Ukrainian guys, one of my favorite divers is a guy named Oleski. He's Ukrainian, and he just reminds me exactly of my little brother. Like, exactly. Even just his attitude reminds me of my little brother. And Alexi's a really good friend of mine. And when I see him, I think of my little brother. And I've known many Ukrainian divers, and they used to compete. We used to all compete against each other. So what I find sad is both people, even the Ukrainians and the Russians in the pool, would get along. And it's sad that good people, unfortunately, get put in some really bad circumstances that are completely out of their control. And had they been removed from that, like when we're all out at a competition, say in Germany or the Gold Coast, competing against each other, everyone's just friends.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's such a reminder that at the surface of, and sometimes below the surface of everything that's happening politically and across the world, there is humanity.
Well, as much as I've travelled, I've been so fortunate to travel around the world with diving, with work, and meet so many different people. And I've just realised nearly all people are the same. They want to live free, love their family, have good people around them, and enjoy what they do for work. I think most people are simple, and they want to just live their life in peace and do their job and play their part. It just sucks that big powers or whatever get in the way of that.
What do you think outside of the Olympics? What's been your favourite experience as a career diver?
The Commonwealth Games was pretty good. That was pretty cool.
Medal as well, which helps.
It was the year after the Olympics, and it was such a crazy experience because the Olympics had finished. I'd blown up on socials. People really started recognising me in the streets and coming up, and you become more high profile and things like that. But just because you're high profile doesn't make your diving any better. You know, you still got to work extremely difficult. Like, the diving and sport's so true like that. Like, no matter what facade or whatever, you can't fake your sport. You can't fake your sport. So I think that's always been really good for keeping me so grounded, because it's just a true reflection of what I do in training and working hard and things like that. So coming into the Commonwealth Games, it was low pressure because I had this public support, which was great. And then I had, earlier in that year, they had me at the Queen's Baton Relay with the Governor General. They invited me to the races where I was doing different events as if I was already going to make the team. And at that stage, I was not going to make the team. Like, we hadn't even had the trials. It was so long away. And then we were doing a fair bit with Channel 7. They were filming different segments, and it just adds pressure. But I've been good at dealing with that, so it didn't stress me out too much. And then you come to the Commonwealth Games trial, and you're like, all right, well, I better make it. You know, I have to. And I even remember coming into the competition, we had to win to get a spot on the Commonwealth Games team. I was diving synchro with a very good friend of mine. His name's Xixing. He's full Chinese. He won a world gold medal for China, and then he's migrated to Australia, and I was diving with him. So even diving with him made me feel really confident because he's extremely experienced. And that event was tough, but we ended up winning. and going through to the Commonwealth and then eventually picking up a medal. So I think that was nearly one of my favourite diving experiences because it came off the back of the Olympics. There was an immense amount of pressure, and then we were able to prevail and bring home a medal.
Where were those Commonwealth Games?
Birmingham. The second biggest city in the UK. Although you don't hear about it too much.
Birmingham is almost Newcastle on steroids, right?
I'd say so.
Still
working. It's a rugged town. I think they own that, yeah.
Peaky Blinders territory.
Yeah, Birmingham.
That's it's cool, mate. It's so cool to see. Like, I think I'm always fascinated when people like yourself, through something they've dedicated so much of their life to, get opportunities, not just to continue to develop their craft and do the thing that they'll put on earth for at least a time to do, but to experience life outside of it. I think that's such a blessing, right?
Well, even after the Commonwealth Games, because at the Olympics you could not leave. Like, if you left the village, you'll probably get sent home because of the COVID rules. But at the Commonwealth, they said, we recommend that you don't leave. I said, okay, you recommend? Or we can't leave. They said, we strongly recommend. So we can. So after our events, we went out, for a drink and things like that.
Sure.
It was good fun. It was really good fun. Even having such a high of winning a medal, and my best friends had flown over to watch me.
That's cool.
And then my mum was there, my little brother as well. So it was really special.
Mate, I love that.
But being able to do a few things after that, that's probably what made the Commonwealth so fun. Being able to go out and celebrate, have a few beers or a few wines, I think I had.
I want to cast your mind forward, and maybe this is a question you can't answer right now, but once diving's over and you've called a day on that, do you think you'll have to kind of commit yourself to something physical still?
Certainly. Like, I train twice a day, and I like being in shape. I like feeling good. I like feeling healthy. I like looking good and being fit. So I'll have to.
What do you think that'll look like?
Honestly, I'll probably join a soccer team.
Mate,
if I'm not injured, I'll
awesome,
probably join a local soccer team. I'd probably get a nice gym membership and try to train, not the same hours, but at least train once a day to stay in shape. Because that's a value that's important to me. Like, my dad's 62, 63, and he trains every day. He's ripped. He's in shape, strong, and it's
tall as well?
He's not super tall, actually. I think I'm the tallest in my family. But so my dad's always built in this, just being fit and healthy is a standard for life. That's just what you got to do. It's just a part of life. That. And it allows you to live life better. And when I think about when I'm so busy with work, it's can I push training aside? It's you can't, because being fit and healthy is what allows you to actually go out and put that effort into work and make you the person you are.
Mate, for sure. My old man's similar.
Yeah?
We used to call him RoboCop because he's a copper. But
good on him, by the way.
Like a brick shit house, mate.
Good on him.
Built like a brick shit house.
Was he a copper down in
Wollongong?
The Gong?
For 11 years, so really hard. My parents were both very hard workers, and so it breeds a level of discipline into you that you want to work hard for the things you've got.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because it's that they're hypocrites in the best sense that they're often saying to me, mate, you got to relax a little bit more. You're always a million miles an hour. But I'm just another version of them.
Yeah. Dad always says similar. He's you got to live life with what your kids saying. Go and do what you want. So I'm doing what I want. But he loves it.
Mate, for sure.
But they are like that, eh?
They are. Because I think it's natural as a parent. Mate, even as a partner, I look at my fiancée, Soph, and I often say to her, she pushes herself really hard. She trains a lot.
She probably mesh well with you then.
She does.
I suppose no wonder you get married.
Relax, right? Yeah. And she's like, you're exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it's true, but you can't help but have the care factor for the people in your life that probably you don't care for yourself in that same regard.
Yeah, I get you. And when you hear someone complaining about, or even just raising an issue with you, sometimes you feel the need to find a solution, but sometimes you just got to hear them out, and then they just got to get through it too.
Mate, for sure. Who's next on the pod? Are you excited about any big ones coming
I want to get Albo. I'm still trying to get Albanese on the podcast. But I'd love to talk to... I'd like to talk to Jerry Harvey, who built Harvey Norman. That's quite impressive. Most of the podcasts is around business leaders, sporting people, and sustainability. One of my favourite podcasts I've done was with a lady named Valerie Taylor, and she's an ocean conservationist. She was the first to film sharks without a cage. And her and Ron Taylor used to go around and film all these sharks all around the world. And she was explaining that different sharks around the world have different temperaments. For example, great white sharks in South Africa, she was saying that around the boat, they would be timid to come up to her. But then in Australia, the great whites would be right in your face. They have a different personality compared to Perth and South Africa. And they also filmed Jaws. So a lot of the shark scenes you see on Jaws of the real shark swimming, they shot.
Interesting. Mate, actually, we probably could do this off camera, but a potentially really good guest for you, good friend of mine, Brett Kennellan, shark attack survivor, attacked by a bull shark 7 years ago.
Where?
Down in
Where was he? Kiama.
Yeah, Bombo Beach.
That's close to you.
Yeah, just 10 minutes south of me.
Bull shark.
Bull shark.
Where did it bite him? Leg?
Leg. Lost a big part of his leg.
Luckily, like the quad?
The quad. Luckily...
Can he walk?
Mate, he's a fucking remarkable human.
Let me guess, he can probably run.
Mate, he's run marathons with me. He's run 100Kers. He's surfing again. Yeah. They took his lats.
That's inspiring, man.
So he's got, for anyone who's listening, you probably know Brett from being on the show a couple of times, but he's got a documentary on Stan across the world.
Yep.
It's called Attacking Life. And they actually show the operation it's pretty gory, but they took part of his lat from his back and put it in his quad. It was an effort to save the leg from amputation. He was the second person to ever have this done in Australia, maybe even around the world. They were just going to try and save it from amputation, the threat of infection, but it actually turned into a functional muscle for him. And then with one lat muscle, he paddled across Hawaiian Islands, like a 50K paddle. He's a remarkable human, but the reason I mention it, your interest in the ocean and climate, Bretto's got a real interest in that, but he's done a bunch of research and a bunch of study and a bunch of writing on shark conservation, and he's interested in those creatures. And
he'd probably know Valerie then.
Mate, he probably would, but I think it'd be a really cool episode for you if you're
probably love to speak to him.
Those kind of stories. So
how good's medical though? Like I was this morning in there getting this injection in my spine, and they put me in this machine, move the needle, pull me back, check it's in the right spot because it's got to go around the nerve and into or just under the disc, and they did it so perfectly. I think how lucky are we to have these doctors that are so experienced that they can look after us. Like they're such heroes, the people in our medical system. Like even just this small procedure I had done this morning, I felt so looked after and so well done. I think when you talk about a brand new procedure, putting a lat in a leg, like I had so much faith in our Australian system to do that.
It's crazy, mate. I was actually sitting next to the surgeon at Brett's documentary premiere in Sydney. Soph and I went up.
What was he like? They're peaceful people.
I didn't realise.
Really?
I didn't realise until I'm sitting there watching the documentary and the surgeon pops on the TV. I look at the guy next to me. I'm like, that's him.
Yeah.
Mate, remarkable. I've had the opportunity to interview Charlie Teo on the podcast. And
how is he? Because I've seen a lot of stuff on him. And
he's a polarising character, right? Like people have divided opinions. I personally have so much respect for Charlie. He saved over 11,000 lives with brain surgery.
Even his wife too, didn't he save her?
I believe so. Yeah.
Twice,
and,
I think.
Mate, it's a remarkable story, and he's had so much time for me. I find him to be such a decent character, and you know, I come from a world in which you learn to respect the medical profession quite highly because
you would know that more than anyone.
We were watching the other night. You know Brian Johnson. Mate, you would know him.
I'm so uncultured in some areas.
You would know him through the podcast and social space. He's the guy that wants to live forever. He's the guy.
Yeah.
He just had a doco come out on Netflix, I believe it was, called Don't Die. And Dr. Mike Israetel, the muscled up guy that's on a bunch of the podcasts, he's very funny. I seen him put up a recommendation on socials, and I'd seen Brian pop up on a bunch of different pods, and I'd listened to one or two. But the way he lives his life and his structure of routine, to me, is quite mundane. Like, it's all in the effort to potentially increase his lifespan and his quality of life. And whilst I'm a big believer in looking after your health, it's like your old man says, it's just a standard for life. I fully believe that. But I also believe that you've got to enjoy your life, right? It's a finite resource. So I've never really highly related to Brian's efforts. But I watched the doco out of curiosity, and at the end of it, I felt compelled to at least be respectful of this guy because, mate, the way he's testing himself and using himself as a guinea pig for the future of science. I've seen a couple scientists who have been skeptical and potentially critical of his efforts say that he's probably going to open up a few potential opportunities for us to really study stuff that we haven't been able to on humans before. And maybe we might all live a little bit longer because of Brian Johnson.
It's an interesting perspective because I couldn't agree more.
Mm.
What quality of life do you have doing everything to just live longer instead of enjoying it?
For
But
sure.
on the flip side, respect to the man for going out and pioneering a space that could benefit us all.
Mate, 100%.
So I'm in two minds about that as well.
I looked at it and I said to Soph, it's quite interesting because, you know, you spoke about the medical profession and that field and how much respect we owe to those people who are frankly heroes, as you said.
Even just walking in there, like the man talks to me, I feel relaxed. Just the way he explains, like, oh, so this is going to happen, then we're going to do that.
For sure.
So we're going to shove this thing in your spine. But the way they say it, and they're like, okay, we're just going to do this or that. And then I'm like, okay. Like, I was
composure
nervous.
helps.
And then when I spoke to them, I felt like, okay, these guys know what they're doing.
Well, I was saying that, you know, I look at it and I'm 28 now. When I was born, not many people lived out of their teenage years with cystic fibrosis.
Did you know that as a kid?
Yeah, I was acutely aware of it. My parents did a very good job of shielding me from a lot of the sad stories. So,
Like, were you scared growing up?
no, not at all. I always had a steadfast belief, I still do, that I'll live a very normal lifespan. Partly because I'm doing all the right things to do that, but also just because I think I'm so stubborn and driven to want to be here. Like, mate, my life is fucking amazing. I have the best people around me, and I believe that your community and your people, much like you spoke about earlier on in the app, mate, for me, that's my will to live. Like, I can't think of any time in which I will have had enough dinners with my partner, or to which I will have caught up.
Sounds
with
like you found the right one. Good on you.
Mate, I'm just very
Congratulations,
lucky.
by the way.
I'm blessed with good people. Thank you. And I look at it and I think, mate, how lucky am I to have been born in 1996, not 1976? Because the way that medical science has developed and jumped in leaps and bounds makes the quality of life that I have today reality. That wasn't 20 years ago. The fact that, you know, there's procedures to keep you in your sport, that there's different ways and alternatives to just slugging it out and then having a back that's rooted for the rest of your life.
That's it. And sometimes it's not just head down, gruelingly push through it. Like, there's times for that.
Yeah.
There's also times to, you know, step back and have a think. And even I look at something like antibiotics. Oh, they amaze me. The fact that antibiotics would have saved hundreds of millions of lives. I believe we use them as pesticides as well, so they help make food and things like that. But I could be wrong, but I think the Black Death was an infection that probably could have been prevented by antibiotics. Like, can you imagine an antibiotic fixing a whole pandemic?
Mate, it's crazy. So when you say the Black Death, do you mean the plague?
The plague, yeah.
So I've got a crazy story for you about the bubonic plague. So I found
What a
out
scary
this
time.
wild, right? Because
Then the Spanish flu, which killed more people than the world wars, and that was running through the trenches and things like that.
wild, right?
It's just,
I
it's
look
scary.
at this. So I was sitting down probably a year ago at Royal Prince Alfred, where I see my specialist for my lungs.
Was there someone with the plague there?
No.
Okay, I was going to say.
No, but they tell me a story about... So basically, 1 in every 2,500 newborn babies is born with CF in Australia.
What's that?
My condition, cystic
okay.
fibrosis.
Yep.
Right? So that's roughly of...
That's a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's roughly 4,000 people living in Australia with cystic fibrosis. So if you are a carrier, so 1 in every 25 people is a carrier of the CF gene. Right now, where you get 2 people who are both carriers of the gene, you have a 1 in 4 chance of having a baby with CF. So my parents were they were both one of the 4% of the population who carry the gene. The 2 of them together had a 25% chance of having a child with CF. Me, but then my sister, no. Now, it's really interesting because it's particularly high chance of being a carrier in the Caucasian population. But in people of African descent, in people of even Asian descent, there are much lower carrier numbers.
Why is that?
This is very interesting. I never knew this. My doctor explained this to me. She said, do you know why that's the case? Because we've started to study genetics, because when we have to go through IVF for our children in the future, starting to understand the chances of Soph being a carrier, and we've got to go and do all those tests, right? And so she explained this to me. She said that the reason that the Caucasian population have such a high percentage of carrying the CF gene is because when the bubonic plague swept through Europe, there was something about the cystic fibrosis genetic mutation that made you more resistant to the plague. So more people with that gene lived through the plague and then went on to populate with people who carried the same gene. Mate,
Because they survived.
unbelievable.
That's insane.
So in a weird twist of fate,
Amazing how like something that is kind of deadly now, it could be, protected you from that. But I suppose, isn't that how vaccines work? Some form of that?
essentially, yeah, it creates a certain immunity. But the interesting thing, so there's a guy, his name's Brian Klaas, he's a scientist, and he wrote a book called Fluke. And essentially, a part of the book is the chaos theory. And he goes in this book to explain these circumstances in which certain things become almost a paradox, right? And it's linked back to this story that I'm alive because of cystic fibrosis, and the plague is the reason that I have cystic fibrosis, likely. So like the fact that my genetic ancestors had the CF gene allowed our family lineage to likely live on, because we're Scottish background, a mix of Scottish and indigenous heritage.
That's so insane.
But it's wild, man. It's wild. Like the medical profession and medical history of the world is a fascinating thing.
And even back then, I heard that the Black Death came into Europe from ships, rats on the ships, and they called them the death ships because they showed up and everyone was dead, or there was one or two people that were still alive but extremely sick. Then they sent the ships back out to sea because they're like, no, we're not taking you, which would have been terrifying. Can you imagine being on one of those ships like, no, you're going to die, send you away? But it was too late. The ships had docked, rats had come off, and because I think the plague was spread by rats and fleas on rats. And then you had the plague doctors that had all the spices in their nose because they were starting to think it could have been airborne. But apparently the thing that actually protected the plague doctors were their coats were drenched in wax. And because fleas couldn't reside in the wax, that's what protected them, not the nose with all the spices. Really? It's just insane how like that whole situation unfolded, but devastating that it costed probably hundreds of millions of lives. But then even today, I could be wrong, I think it could have been prevented with antibiotics.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think I've got two feelings about antibiotics. I think
because you've been on a fair few. I get a hard time from my docs about it.
Mate, I've been on a fair few. Like there was stages of my life where for like a decade I was on prolonged antibiotics, both inhaled.
How long is that? Capsule. And what's inhaled?
So there's a
because I know you got I'm fascinated about antibiotics. Yeah. I know you've got tablets and you can get them injected. I've never had them injected, but I've had a fair few tablets over the years.
By injected, do you mean like IV through a drip? Yeah. So I've had both of those more occasions than I'd like to remember. But I used to for years, mate. I reckon literally the first 16 years of my life, I would inhale through a nebulizer.
What's that?
Have you ever seen those machines? Basically, it pushes air pressure through and takes like a liquid and turns it into a mist, and you breathe it in.
Is it anything like a puffer, like a Ventolin?
Similar concept,
preventioner?
Right? Similar concept, except you're basically evaporating a liquid into something that you breathe in.
Wow. So because I've never seen these.
Yeah,
so
it's cool.
It's like a sprayable antibiotic that you...
Well, a huge part of my CF care routine for the first 24 years of my life, in fact, until I got this recent drug that I was telling you about earlier, was I would every day do about an hour and a half of nebulized medication where I'd sit there and just breathe in this machine.
Wait, you would sit there and breathe it in for an hour and a half?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Is that because it goes into your lungs where you've got the infection, or is it just like another means of, like, why breathe it in versus take a tablet?
So essentially the idea was to treat potential lung infections, to prevent certain infections, but also to thin and move the mucus off the lungs. So it was kind of like a 3-step process where, as a kid, when you're a baby, you can't do all these things, right? So there were different means to that. And my parents used to do like an hour of hands-on physio every day where they'd like beat my chest like a gorilla would beat their chest, but it would break up the mucus on the lungs and help move it off because you want to clear it. If it's sitting on the lungs, it's impairing the function and creating a breeding ground for infection. So my parents would do that, and then when you're old enough to breathe this stuff in and do what they'd call a PEP mask, I had a routine for 20 odd years, which was I'd breathe in a drug called Pulmazine, which helps to thin the mucus on the lungs. I'd then wait a little while for that to settle in. I would then do a salt water, they call it a hypertonic saline solution, which helps to break up and move the mucus on the lungs. Then I do a PEP mask, which is like you breathe against resistance that basically you like push out, air goes back through this machine and pushes back into the lungs to help move the mucus. And then after I'd done that and a bunch of like heavy coughing to try and clear stuff, I would breathe in a nebulized antibiotic called tobramycin that helped to treat and prevent certain infections.
How long would this take you?
About an hour and a half every day.
Every day you had to do this?
Yeah, eventually the machinery and the technology got better that I could sort of do it in half an hour towards the
Is that amazing that
years.
just in your short lifespan of doing that, you saw technology shift and it actually improve your life?
Massively. It's insane. And to be honest with you, like most kids with CF, not to say every antibiotic treatment that I had, but most kids with CF who should have been doing this routine maybe sometimes didn't. A lot of it was prevention as opposed to curing stuff.
Could that be life-threatening by not doing it?
Yeah, I think so. You know, and it's hard to say, mate, because you never want to make people feel bad for the things they didn't do. Like, everyone has different propensity for risk and wants to live their life and treat things in different ways. For me and my family, our particular view was do everything you can to prevent future problem.
Certainly.
And when it comes to your health and your life and a condition that, like even to this day, the life expectancy for someone with CF is 41 years of age. Right, I'm in very good shape compared to the average person with CF.
And you were saying before, many of you even made it out of childhood.
Mate, when I was born, yeah, that was certainly the case. And for a long time, it was called the childhood's disease because people just wouldn't live to see their adult years. But we exist in a very good time. Certainly the best time it's ever existed to live with CF if you're going to live with it. But for me personally, there were just so many things that we chose to control that I think have majorly contributed to, mate, I have cystic fibrosis, liver disease, diabetes, and esophageal varices issues. To have all of those things, to have taken 50 tablets a day for the majority of my life, and to be able to run marathons and do all the stuff that I do now, I'm blessed. I'm very lucky. But I've also worked very hard for that.
I was going to say, good on you for working hard for that and looking after yourself and taking action to try to be in the best health you can be. Because you're looking healthy. I walked in, I was like, he looks jacked.
Trying hard, trying hard. So, but I think it's the sustenance of life. You know, what do you do without your health?
And that's why when I think about how busy I get and then making sure I never cut corners on training, because training allows you to live life to the fullest, to go out and, jump off those rocks and do some backflips and have fun and run and jump and make the most of this world that we live in. And that's why even having this back injury for a while, it's prohibited a lot of that.
Of course. What's next for you? Like, what's exciting you about the year to come where in March, which is wild, can't believe how quick the first few months have gone.
It's insane.
But what's coming up this year that you're excited about?
I want to sort out my back so I can go to World Championships and continue to compete and train in my diving.
When's that?
It's meant to be mid-year, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to go. Like, they want me to go to New Zealand 2 weeks ago and compete, and I couldn't. I'm meant to go to 2 training camps in Brisbane this month, and I cannot. I was meant to go compete in Mexico this month, and I can't. I'm meant to try to qualify for World Championships mid-year, and I don't know. So there's a lot of unknowns in the diving space, but I've always built things outside diving because I knew things like this would happen, and I just had to be prepared. Like my dad always says, you expect the best, but you prepare for the worst. So I've always built things outside diving. So I want to try to get back diving and be at full health in my back. That's a good goal to strive for. Then outside of that, I want to continue building up my businesses. I want to make better videos. I want to learn more about content. Like I still feel like an amateur, and I want to look at it from an amateur's perspective and always be curious and learn, because things move and I want to move with it. And I want to make more fun videos. It's tough too, because a lot of my videos require me to be really fit and healthy so I can go out and try different things. But I want to travel more, make more videos. Like, for example, last year we went overseas to the Maldives with me and the team to Club Med. We were there for 10 days and we got them over 10 million views. I think it's up to around 13 now based on the videos. Holy shit. I want to do more travel stuff because it's fun. I'm with people I love, seeing the world while being successful on the social stuff, which I enjoy.
What's on the travel bucket list?
I feel I've honestly traveled everywhere that I really wanted to go at this point in my life. I want to go more places, but everywhere I really wanted to go, I've done, which I feel grateful for.
Where's your favorite?
The Maldives was pretty cool. We went there and there was literally a hurricane off the coast of Sri Lanka, so it was windy as hell the whole time we were there. but I still loved it. So if that was pristine, I think it would have been insane. So the Maldives were extremely cool. I love like Barcelona. There's an island called Mallorca. I went to a lot of these places with my best mate, one of my good mates, well, with my team, and one of my best mates, his name's Hamo. So it's funny because we go to these like extremely beautiful places around the world, and very grateful that they put us up in like these 6-star hotels, like at the Maldives with Club Med. And it could be like extremely romantic, but I'm just there with like my best mate. And like, so I'd love to go to some of those places with a girlfriend.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think that'd be good. I don't have one at the moment. So at the moment,
actively looking, or
I'm just cruising. Like, it's really tough too because I'm so busy and I train so often. And when I'm not training, I'm working a lot. I get kind of tired, like just physically,
for sure,
really tired. So it's tough to go out and do different things. And my last girlfriends I've met out when I was at the clubs or at the bar, which is a really good place to meet people because you meet them in person, which I enjoy. I enjoy doing that. But it can be difficult to meet new people when you have such a rigid routine that needs to be done or that's required for your job. Like, where'd you meet your fiance?
Mate, I seen a photo of her. I seen a photo of her through kind of like a mutual connection on Instagram. I'd literally just come home from 2 weeks over in New York and LA by myself, just traveling.
Good on you.
Came home, I was sitting on the lounge with the dog, having a McFlurry.
Oh, that's the way.
And watching the telly.
Love Macca's.
And I was scrolling through and I was like, oh my God, who is that? She's gorgeous, like beautiful smile.
Like, was she tagged in one of your mates' photos?
Yeah, mate, just not even a mate, just someone I knew locally. Like, you know how you just got all these connections? Wollongong, I can imagine, is much like Newcastle, where people say 6 degrees of separation. Yeah. Not even.
That's why I like Sydney. I got enough distance to be able to not feel too close to everyone.
It's a bigger city.
Yeah, I like that.
I seen this photo of Soph. I'd never seen her before. I didn't know who she was. She had very little social media presence and photos up, so she was a bit of a mystery. But sent her a message because I thought...
So you just slid into her DMs?
Yeah, because I just thought, mate, she's so beautiful.
I respect the hustle.
Someone's going to absolutely steal her off.
You got to have a go. You got to have a go. You got to have a crack. Like, sometimes, if you get no, that's cool too. But you got to try.
Mate, you got to try. I just absolutely fooled her into falling in love with me, and here we are, a couple of years later.
Wow. So wait, did you just DM her? Where was your first date?
I DM'd her, and like, I love a coffee, and I'm a big
proponent. I offered to get you one this morning.
Yeah, you know, I'd already had a couple. I love it so much. I usually get my fair share of coffee very early in the morning. Okay. And I just said to her, like, hey, would love to have a coffee, take you for a walk, and just chat and get to know each other. And she was on board, and so we caught up. It was a week after I messaged her. And, mate, we just had such a good time. We were literally together for 5 hours, just chatting the house down, and walked for probably 2.5 of them. When I tell that story, people go, you walked for 5 hours? I'm like, no, we walked for probably 2 and a bit hours, sat down, had another coffee and a juice, and just chatted. And I loved her. You could tell her morals and her values straight away. Like, loved her family to bits, wanted to talk about her family. Grew up in the country, so just got great morals and had a beautiful childhood, got siblings and parents she loves, and I just connected with her on all of that stuff straight away. And I still believe she's the kindest, most beautifully hearted person I've ever met. And I love that about a person, because it's an absolute cherry on top that she's just drop dead gorgeous. And mate, I'm punching so far above my weight, it's ridiculous.
Good on you. You gotta have it. You gotta have a go.
You gotta have a go. So I don't know how, but maybe it's the charm. But it's
he's got the riz. You have to drop some strategies,
mate.
You gotta give me some strategies.
I don't think it's any strategy, because I was falling flat on my face before her. I think it's just, mate, the divine intervention and timing of meeting the right person at the right time of my life. We both wanted the same things from the next 5 or 10 years of our life, and for both of us, like family and those kind of things are really high up on our list of priorities. So I feel very privileged, Sam, because, you know, like there were so many good things in my life before I met her, and all of those same good things are now even better because I get to share them with her.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
good on you for finding someone like that. It's incredible.
For sure. It's fun, man. It's so funny. We laugh because, you know, Chris Williamson, podcaster.
I think so.
Modern Wisdom.
Yeah. Blonde guy, right?
Yeah, sort of like Blondie.
Not too much hair.
Crew cut, yeah. Good looking rooster. Yeah. And he had a clip up with Sam Morrell, the comedian, and they were talking about like perfect first dates.
Yeah.
And he said, I've heard a walk is a good first date. And I, like, my ears pricked up. And Sam goes, a walk, man, that's a great way of telling a girl you're homeless. I don't have anywhere to take you out. Let's go for a walk. I'm broke. I can't afford to buy anything. Can't afford to take you to dinner. Let's go for a walk.
I might take you straight.
And it's quite funny, right? Yeah. So I was laughing and I put a comment saying like, this is funny or whatever. And I just said, I met my fiance 2.5 years ago, went on a walk and coffee date that lasted 5 hours, been together ever since, getting married next year.
Did you apply?
The funny thing is it got heaps of replies and heaps of interaction. The best comment was some guy goes, I can't remember the word for word, but he said, bro proved that if you find the right one, it doesn't matter how much of a tight ass you are or something. And I just thought that was such a great backhanded compliment.
Sometimes I watch a video and I think this video is funny, but I just want to check the comments.
Yeah.
Some people are just immensely creative. Like sometimes
So good.
I'll laugh like a 7 out of 10 at the video and I'll see this comment and I'll laugh a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's
so
great.
funny. So
I think if you can handle the banter, it's brilliant.
Oh, I love it.
Right?
I love it. Even some of the like hate comments on mine,
Yeah.
I'll read them, and some of them are honestly so smart, so creative. My mates will flick them to me. I'll be like, "Fuck, that is funny. That's good. That's good."
That's great.
Yeah, there's been some
That's
really
great.
funny ones over the years.
Well, mate, I'm excited for you because I feel like you're at a very exciting point in your life. There's so many good things happening for you. They are of your own creation. And I'm sure we've all got our fair share of chance in there too and a little bit of luck. But
Certainly. I just feel like there's always luck, but by always showing up and being there, when the luck opens, you'll be ready.
For sure. Mate, such a pleasure to chat.
No, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, thank you.
I
I appreciate
appreciate
it. Cheers. That was good fun.
No, it was very nice.